E3 has come to an end. Another year of E3. We've done some good coverage this year. I feel good about the content we've produced. We've covered the press conferences if you've missed that. We've covered the show stealers, the biggest games of E3 this year. We've talked about the Xbox One X, the new console that was unveiled this year. And now to end our coverage, we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects every single year. The hidden gems, the games that don't get enough coverage, but that may still be worthy of your attention. We're talking about the smaller titles, but sometimes it's on those smaller titles that we find the most creativity. So here they are, the hidden gems of E3 2017. Hidden Agenda comes from the developers of Until Dawn. And structurally, the game is very similar. It's sort of an adventure game with a lot of options where everyone in this story can die or everyone can live. It just depends on what you choose. The way you play Hidden Agenda, though, is very different from Until Dawn, and that's what makes this game really stand out. It's one of the moves by Sony to try to make gaming a bit more inclusive. So you play with your phone. And I know that sounds like a turn-off, but hear me out. I played Until Dawn with my girlfriend, and she would play the female characters, I would play the male characters, but we would sort of discuss what to choose when we had the time to do it. Hidden Agenda takes that concept and gives it a more social aspect. So everyone can play with their phones, they can vote sort of democratically on what decision to make at any given time, but then it takes it a step further, and the game sometimes will give a player an individual mission, like a hidden agenda. Like the title says, oh, I just figured out what the title is, okay. Next up, Unruly Heroes. This is a beautiful, a gorgeous 2D action platformer. It's inspired by the story of the Monkey King that we've seen in multiple games. And we know that the game will have 4-player co-op. It seems to be optional, you seem to be able to play by yourself. And there are 4 different characters and they seem to behave very, very differently. I'm curious to see how this game's gonna work from a single player perspective. Like, can you switch characters on the fly or not? We don't know yet, but it will have 4-player co-op. It will even have a PvP mode, which looks very interesting because the combat in this is snappy. It looks really, really awesome. And we want to learn more because right now that's all we know, and that's not a lot. But seriously, visually this game is looking very impressive, animation work is phenomenal, and the different characters seem to behave in a distinct way from one another. So the gameplay implications there seem to be very, very interesting. Up next is Blasphemous, and Blasphemous caught our attention way back, months ago. The easy way to describe this game is it's a 2D Dark Souls, but so many games have been described that way in the last couple of years that we should really dive into what makes this game special. So the first thing that stands out is the art style. 2D Souls games have a tendency to be a bit more cartoony than this. And this is dark. The monsters or bosses have this disturbing design to them. And then the game is also incredibly violent as well. Even though it's pixel art, it's extremely bloody. I mean, we've seen Devolver Digital do a lot of bloody pixel art style, so that isn't necessarily surprising by itself, but yeah, there are executions and fatalities that can be performed in this game that are truly disturbing. And even though this might be an E3 gem that we had discovered months ago, we found this to be the perfect time to showcase it here on the channel for those who hadn't heard about it yet. Next up, another gorgeous 2D action game. The name is Sundered. This is from the creators of Jotun. Some of you might have played that already. And it's Metroidvania, which means you should expect some unlockable abilities that take you to some brand new places. The combat has a hack and slash vibe to it, and the developers are promising dynamic hordes of enemies, as well as huge bosses and monsters, which I think we see some of that in the trailer. Perhaps the most interesting bit about this game is that the levels are both handcrafted and procedurally generated. There's a mix between both. There are sections that have been hand-tailored, perhaps because of the abilities that you unlock and they want you to use those abilities to learn them, but then there's a lot of procedural generation, you know, just to keep things from being boring or just so you have a very different experience from what other players are having. Now let's follow that up with another game that has been announced way back, Call of Cthulhu. Even though it was announced way back, it was also present at E3 this year, as the game's release is actually happening later this year. This is an RPG horror, and I'm not entirely sure what that means. And it also takes place in a semi-open world, which I'm not entirely sure what that means either. And in a way, that's great. So many games fit into different categories that you know immediately what they are. So having the genre be this kind of mysterious thing is awesome in a horror game on top of that. Which horror games, I mean, you should know what the setting is to know if you're into it or not, but the element of surprise is such a big deal that you really shouldn't dig any more into it if you're interested in playing. Next, let's talk about Unto the End. Have you guys had enough of pretty 2D side-scrollers yet? Because I haven't. The combat in this one isn't so hack and slashy as the other games on this list. It's been described as something a bit more tactical and skillful. This is yet another game that we don't know much about. All we know is what the developers tell us, and they say we'll be exploring beautiful landscapes and fighting the dangers of the wilderness, and all of this is actually story driven, so as you're doing that, you'll uncover a handcrafted narrative. I do have some concerns with this one. It's not all hype all the time. Some of the animations look a bit rough, something that can be fixed by the final game, but I'm afraid that might make combat a little bit clunky. Other than that, the game looks gorgeous, and yeah, I can't wait to learn more about it. Just like every game on this list. Next, let's talk about Lone Echo. This is the only VR game that I've decided to feature this year. Lone Echo has a single player portion, but what really caught my attention was the multiplayer portion, which is called Echo Arena. So basically this is a sports game. You have a ball, you can pass it to your teammates and score on the opposing team's goal. This is a 3v3 game in zero gravity. And by making this in zero gravity, it kind of solves an issue that almost all VR games have, which is movement. It's hard to make movement in VR. So the way you move in zero gravity is by pushing yourself off walls or off the objects that are in the middle of the arena. This is really what sold me on the idea. However, I am also concerned because VR isn't selling like crazy. So this is a 3v3 multiplayer thing, and with limited VR headsets out there, if this is not a free game, I don't know if it's gonna have enough copies out there to do well for you to find matches easily. But despite that concern, I have to give this game props for doing movement in a different way that makes total sense in VR. Good job. Next up, a trailer that made me very, very uncomfortable. A Plague Tale: Innocence. It's full of rats. Rats are annoying, and I don't want to be in this world. I don't want to be here at all. But that means it was an effective trailer. It managed to awaken these disturbing emotions in me. It's an action and adventure with supernatural rats. Great. You have to use light to avoid the rats and survive. We don't know much else, but again, it's an interesting concept. Next up, let's talk about Tunic. This is an isometric action-adventure that you play with a cute little fox. It's another game with a really good-looking style as well. It has a Zelda vibe to it. You have a sword, a shield, and you have a dodge roll, which, you know, not very Zelda, but everything else kind of is. You have some unique boss fights that look very original, and that's pretty much all we know so far. As the developer described this game to PC Gamer, you wander the countryside, you fight monsters, you find secrets. Yeah, big Zelda vibe from this. And we saved the best for last. Project Code Shift. This game needs a different name really fast. It took me a while to find it. So it's another 2D game with some amazing animation work. It's fast hack and slash action with a cyber samurai, and it just has some great style. Combat seems kind of complex. You have different weapons and different characters, and you do these crazy aerial combos that you then create platforms to run up walls. And the way you create these platforms is because there are parallel worlds in this game. Like there's a more futuristic world and then there's this world that we're watching. And it seems like the character is tapping into the parallel worlds to create these different platforms to keep the aerial combos going. There are aerial parries and blocks, and oh, the combat seems kind of crazy in this one. I really love the aesthetics, the animation, and there will be PvP. This is not only a single player thing. Really can't wait to learn more about this one. I really loved what I saw. There you have it, folks. 10 titles that you may not have heard about this year at E3 because so many big games get announced, so many big games get covered that, you know, there's not a lot of space left for these guys. So I think it's important that channels, not just like my own, but like the channels out there, the bigger channels should really highlight some of these games because they do seem to have the quality to really stand out. I would love to know which one of these games captured your interest the most. You already know which one captured mine. So yeah, head down to the comments, let us know. All the games we talked about today and throughout this week are possibilities for us to cover in the future. We've been making a lot of videos about upcoming games and we plan on making more of them. But as always, this is not just about the stuff we care about, it's the stuff you guys care about. So by leaving a comment, you guys are letting us know you want to see more content about a specific game. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and if you've missed any of our E3 coverage in the past few days, here's a playlist of all the stuff that we've done with E3 this year. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Globku. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!
Thank you.